Welcome back to the Numis Explorer, coin hunters and collectors, and get ready because today we are exploring the fascinating story of the 1980 quarter dollar and the incredible possibilities that can make an ordinary-looking coin become a highly desirable collectible. The 1980 Washington quarter was struck at the Denver Mint, and millions of quarters from this era entered circulation, which means most examples are not rare simply because of their date and mint mark. However, the world of error coins is completely different, because a coin that contains a genuine mint-made mistake can attract serious attention from collectors, especially when the error is dramatic, unusual, and easily identifiable. This is why you should never judge an old quarter only by its age or face value. When collectors examine a 1980 quarter, they may look for possible doubling, off-center strikes, broad strikes, clipped planchets, die cracks, die breaks, struck-through errors, unusual rim formations, missing design details caused by striking problems, or other abnormalities that can indicate something happened during the manufacturing process. One of the most exciting possibilities is an off-center strike, which occurs when the planchet is not properly positioned between the dies and part of the design is left outside its normal location. The more dramatic and clearly documented the displacement, the more interesting the coin can become, although value depends heavily on authenticity, condition, and collector demand. Another possibility is a broad strike, where the coin is struck without being properly contained by the collar, potentially creating an unusually wide or distorted shape. Collectors may also search for clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank is missing because of a problem during the planchet making process. These errors can have distinctive characteristics that help experts determine whether the irregularity happened at the mint or was caused later by damage. Die cracks and die breaks are also important areas to inspect because dies can deteriorate over time, allowing raised lines, lumps, or unusual shapes to appear on coins struck from them. A dramatic die break can become especially interesting when it produces a recognizable and repeatable feature that collectors can identify across multiple examples. Doubling is another feature that often attracts attention, but it is important to distinguish genuine double die characteristics from ordinary machine doubling or post-mint damage. A true double die is created during the preparation of the die itself and can show specific forms of separation or doubling in parts of the design, while mechanical or strike-related effects may appear differently and usually do not carry the same level of numismatic importance. Another possibility collectors investigate is a struck-through error, which can happen when foreign material comes between the die and planchet during striking, potentially leaving an unusual missing or distorted portion of the design. In rare circumstances, coins can also be struck on an incorrect planchet, and such wrong planchet errors can be extremely fascinating because the coin may have an unusual weight, appearance, thickness, or composition compared with a normal quarter. These kinds of errors are especially important to authenticate because a coin's unusual appearance alone does not prove that it was created at the mint. Sometimes coins are damaged after leaving the mint through machinery, chemicals, impacts, bending, cutting, or other forms of alteration, and such damage generally does not create the same collectible premium as a genuine mint error. This is why serious collectors weigh coins, measure them, examine their edges, compare their design details, and sometimes submit them to professional authentication and grading services. Now, you may have heard sensational claims that a 1980 quarter could be worth $126 million because of errors and mistakes. That figure should not be treated as the established market price of an ordinary 1980 quarter, because extraordinary valuations require extraordinary evidence, including authentication, a documented rarity, exceptional condition, and credible market or auction records. Nevertheless, the idea behind the treasure hunt remains exciting because rare coins have historically attracted collectors when they possess unusual combinations of rarity, condition, provenance, and minting characteristics. A normal 1980 quarter is not automatically a fortune, but a genuinely rare and dramatic error can be much more interesting than a standard circulated example. Condition also matters enormously. A coin that survived decades with sharp details, minimal contact marks, strong luster, and excellent preservation can attract considerably more attention than a heavily worn coin, especially if the unusual error is clearly visible. Collectors may examine Washington's portrait, the lettering, the date, the mint mark, the eagle and surrounding inscriptions, the rim, and the edge for anything that appears inconsistent with a normal specimen. They may also compare the coin with reference images and known varieties to determine whether the feature is a recognized mint error or simply damage. Even small details can matter, because the difference between a genuine mint-made anomaly and damage created decades later can completely change the numismatic significance of the coin. This is why coin collecting is not simply about finding an old coin and assuming it must be valuable. It is about observation, research, comparison, authentication, and understanding how coins were actually manufactured. Imagine finding a 1980 quarter in an old collection and noticing that the design appears dramatically shifted toward one side, the rim looks unusual, and the weight does not match a standard example. That would be a reason to investigate further rather than immediately spending the coin. Perhaps the feature is a genuine mint error, perhaps it is a known variety, or perhaps it is simply damage that occurred after circulation. The exciting part is discovering the truth. You should also remember that dramatic internet claims can sometimes mix a coin's theoretical value, an exaggerated headline, or an unverified story with actual market prices. A responsible collector should always look for evidence from recognized numismatic references, professional grading services, and documented sales before believing a huge valuation. If you think you have an unusual 1980 quarter, protect it from scratches and further damage, avoid cleaning or polishing it, record its weight and measurements if you have reliable equipment, and seek an expert opinion before making any assumptions about its value. Cleaning a potentially valuable coin can actually reduce its desirability because collectors generally prefer original surfaces. The greatest lesson from the 1980 quarter is that ordinary-looking coins can deserve a second look, especially when you understand what genuine mint errors can look like. So check your coin jars, old collections, inherited change, and forgotten boxes, because the next unusual discovery could be hiding somewhere you never expected. Whether your 1980 quarter turns out to be a normal circulated coin or an unusual error, examining it can teach you something fascinating about American coin production and the history of the U.S. Mint. And if you enjoy the thrill of searching for rare coins, discovering unusual errors, and learning why certain pieces become valuable to collectors, make sure you stay with the Numis Explorer, subscribe to the channel, and share your discoveries in the comments. The next time you receive a quarter in your change, don't automatically assume it is ordinary. Take a closer look, because sometimes the smallest manufacturing mistake can create the biggest collecting mystery. Next, 1978 $quarter coin. Today we are taking a fascinating journey into the world of the 1978 $quarter, a coin that may look completely ordinary at first glance but can become extremely interesting when unusual minting errors, varieties, mistakes, or exceptional preservation are involved. If you have ever wondered whether an old quarter sitting inside a collection, coin jar, drawer, or inherited box could be worth far more than its face value, this is exactly the kind of coin that deserves a closer look. The 1978 Washington quarter was produced for everyday commerce, and because large numbers were struck, simply owning a quarter from 1978 does not automatically make it rare or extremely valuable. However, the situation can change when a particular example contains a genuine mint-made error or an unusual variety that separates it from millions of normal coins. This is where the excitement of coin hunting begins, because collectors are not only looking for old coins, they are looking for unusual coins with a story, a manufacturing mistake, a scarce variety, or a condition that makes them stand out from the ordinary population. You may have heard dramatic claims that a 1978 $quarter could be worth $120 million because of errors and mistakes, but it is important to understand that such an enormous figure should be treated as a sensational possibility rather than an established price for a normal 1978 quarter. Real coin values depend on authentication, rarity, condition, demand, provenance, and documented sales, and an ordinary circulated 1978 quarter is not automatically worth anything close to such a figure. Still, there are several fascinating possibilities that can make a 1978 quarter much more interesting to collectors, and understanding these possibilities can help you recognize why some unusual coins attract attention while others do not. One of the first things collectors may examine is the date and overall design, looking carefully for anything that appears doubled, misplaced, distorted, unusually weak, or inconsistent with a normal example. Genuine double die characteristics can sometimes be valuable because the doubling originates during the die-making process rather than being created by damage after the coin was struck. Collectors may inspect the lettering, numbers, inscriptions, and design details for evidence of genuine separation or doubling, but it is crucial to remember that not every apparent doubling is a valuable double die. Machine doubling, strike-related effects, die deterioration, scratches, and other forms of damage can create appearances that resemble valuable varieties, so careful comparison and authentication are essential. Another major possibility is an off-center strike, which occurs when a blank planchet is not properly positioned between the dies during striking. When this happens, part of the design can be missing from the coin while the remaining design is dramatically shifted toward one side. A small amount of displacement may be interesting, while a dramatic and clearly visible off-center strike can be much more desirable, particularly when the date and mint information remain visible and the error can be confirmed as a genuine mint-made mistake. This type of error demonstrates just how precise the normal minting process needs to be and how an interruption in that process can create a collectible anomaly. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can happen when a coin is struck without proper containment from the collar. Instead of maintaining the normal dimensions and rim structure, the metal can spread outward during the striking process, creating a wider or unusual-looking coin. A genuine broad strike can be fascinating because it provides physical evidence of a problem during production, but once again, collectors need to distinguish an authentic mint error from a coin that was damaged or altered after leaving the mint. Clipped planchets are another error type that can attract attention. A planchet is the blank piece of metal that becomes a coin after striking, and if something goes wrong during the process of punching blanks from metal strips, a portion of the planchet can be missing. This can result in a curved or straight clip depending on how the problem occurred. Collectors may examine the shape of the missing section, the rim characteristics around the affected area, and the overall appearance to determine whether the coin could represent a genuine mint-made clip. A coin with an unusual clipped planchet can become much more interesting when the error is obvious and consistent with recognized minting processes. Another area worth examining is the rim and edge. Sometimes unusual striking conditions can produce distorted rims, incomplete details, or other characteristics that may initially appear mysterious. However, collectors should be cautious because damage from vending machines, coin counting equipment, tools, impacts, or other sources can also alter the edge and rim. The key question is always whether the unusual feature was created during the minting process or after the coin entered circulation. Die cracks and die breaks are also possibilities that can make a 1978 quarter more collectible. Coin dies experience enormous pressure during production, and over time they can develop cracks, chips, or breaks. When a damaged die strikes additional coins, the defect can appear repeatedly on each example. A small die crack may create a thin raised line, while a more dramatic die break can produce a larger raised area or unusual blob-like feature. The more distinctive the die characteristic, the easier it may be for collectors to recognize and compare with other examples. Die clashes are another fascinating possibility. A die clash can occur when opposing dies come together without a planchet between them, potentially transferring portions of one die's design onto the opposite die. A coin subsequently struck with that damaged die can display unusual design elements that do not normally belong in that location. Genuine clash marks can be very interesting to specialists because they reveal something about the mechanical events that occurred inside the minting equipment. Another possibility is a struck-through error, where foreign material becomes trapped between the die and planchet during striking. Depending on the material and circumstances, this can leave a depression, missing detail, or unusual texture on the finished coin. These errors can vary considerably, and some are much more dramatic than others. Collectors may also investigate whether a quarter was struck on the wrong planchet. This is one of the most intriguing categories of mint errors because the coin may have the wrong size, weight, thickness, color, or composition for its denomination. A wrong planchet strike can potentially be extremely desirable when authenticated because it represents a major production mistake that should normally have been caught during manufacturing. However, because coins can also be altered intentionally or accidentally after production, professional examination is extremely important before assigning a large value to any unusual specimen. Another possibility is a double strike, where a coin is struck more than once and the second strike occurs in a different position. Depending on the circumstances, this can create overlapping design elements, distorted lettering, or other unusual characteristics. A dramatic multiple strike can be visually impressive and may attract collectors who specialize in mint errors. There can also be incomplete strikes or weak strikes, where certain design details do not appear as strongly as expected because of problems involving striking pressure, die condition, or other production factors. Not every weakly struck coin is valuable, however, because normal variation in strike quality and wear can produce similar appearances. This is why collectors compare unusual examples with known normal coins and study the characteristics carefully. Condition is another major factor that should never be ignored. A 1978 quarter with a genuine error and exceptionally high preservation could be significantly more desirable than a similar error coin that has been heavily circulated, scratched, cleaned, or damaged. Collectors often pay close attention to original surfaces, luster, sharpness of detail, contact marks, scratches, and signs of cleaning. A coin that has survived decades with minimal wear can be much more appealing, especially when combined with a rare and dramatic mint error. This is why you should never clean a potentially valuable coin simply because you think making it shiny will increase its price. Harsh cleaning can damage the original surface and potentially reduce collector interest. Instead, preserve the coin in its existing condition and seek knowledgeable advice. Another important factor is authentication. In the modern age, photographs of unusual coins can spread rapidly online, and dramatic claims about $1 million or $100 million values can easily become exaggerated. A headline claiming that a particular quarter is worth $120 million does not prove that an example has actually sold for that amount. Serious collectors look for evidence. They examine the coin, compare it with established varieties, verify whether the feature could have occurred during minting, check weight and dimensions, and when appropriate, submit the coin to a reputable professional grading and authentication service. This process can separate a genuine mint error from a damaged coin and can also help establish a realistic market value. If you believe you have a valuable 1978 quarter, avoid making assumptions based only on appearance. Look at the date, inspect the lettering, study the rim, examine. Next, 1982p $quarter coin. Today we are taking a fascinating look at the 1982p Washington quarter dollar and the incredible possibilities that can make an ordinary-looking coin far more interesting to collectors when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, or exceptional condition are involved. At first glance, a 1982p quarter may appear to be nothing more than a familiar piece of American pocket change, but experienced collectors know that the smallest details can sometimes separate a normal coin from an unusual and potentially valuable specimen. The 1982p quarter was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and large numbers were produced for circulation, so the date and Philadelphia Mint origin alone do not make every example rare. However, coins can sometimes leave the mint with mistakes that were never supposed to happen, and when those mistakes are genuine, dramatic, and properly authenticated, they can become highly interesting to the collecting community. You may have seen sensational claims suggesting that a 1982p quarter dollar could be worth $115 million because of errors and mistakes, but it is extremely important to understand that such a figure should not be treated as the established market value of an ordinary 1982p quarter. Real-world coin values depend on authentication, rarity, condition, collector demand, provenance, and documented sales, and an enormous valuation would require extraordinary evidence. Nevertheless, the possibility of finding a significant mint error is exactly what makes coin hunting so exciting, because a coin that looks ordinary at first can sometimes reveal an unusual manufacturing characteristic when examined carefully. One of the first things collectors may inspect on a 1982p quarter is the overall strike and the positioning of the design. A dramatic off-center strike can occur when a blank planchet is improperly positioned between the dies during the striking process. Instead of receiving the design perfectly centered, the coin may show the design shifted toward one side, leaving a portion of the planchet blank. The degree of displacement can matter greatly to collectors, and a dramatic off-center error that still clearly shows important identifying details can be especially interesting. However, not every coin that looks slightly off-center is rare or valuable, and professional examination may be necessary to determine whether the feature represents a genuine mint error. Another possibility is a broad strike, which can happen when a coin is struck without proper containment from the collar. The metal can spread outward under the tremendous pressure of the dies, creating an unusually wide appearance and potentially changing the normal shape of the rim. A genuine broad strike can provide direct evidence of a malfunction or abnormal condition during production, but collectors must distinguish it from coins that were physically flattened or damaged after leaving the mint. The edge and rim can provide important clues when examining such a coin. A clipped planchet is another fascinating type of error that collectors may search for. Before a coin is struck, metal strips are punched into individual blanks called planchets. If the punching process is disrupted, a portion of the blank can be missing, creating a distinctive clipped shape. Depending on the circumstances, the clip may be curved, straight, or otherwise unusual. Collectors can study the affected area, the rim, and the overall metal flow to determine whether the feature is consistent with a genuine mint-made clip. This is important because damage caused by tools or other objects can sometimes create a shape that looks superficially similar. The difference between an authentic mint error and post-mint damage is one of the most important lessons for anyone searching for valuable coins. Another area of interest is doubling. A genuine double die variety develops during the creation of the die, and when that die is used to strike coins, the resulting pieces can display characteristic doubling in specific design elements. Collectors may examine the date, lettering, inscriptions, and other details for signs of genuine separation or secondary images. However, apparent doubling is often misunderstood because machine doubling, die deterioration, strike effects, and damage can create appearances that are not the same as a true doubled die. Therefore, seeing something that looks doubled does not automatically mean that a coin is extremely valuable. Careful comparison with known examples and professional attribution can be extremely important. The 1982 P quarter may also be examined for die cracks, die chips, and die breaks. Coin dies are subjected to tremendous forces, and as they age or become damaged, cracks and breaks can develop. When a cracked or damaged die continues striking coins, the defect can appear as a raised feature on the coins produced by that die. A small die crack may look like a thin raised line, while a more dramatic die break can create a larger raised area or unusual shape. Collectors often find these features fascinating because they can sometimes be traced across multiple examples, providing evidence that the feature originated from the die itself rather than from damage to an individual coin. Another possible error is a die clash, which can occur when the opposing dies come together without a planchet between them. Portions of one die's design can potentially transfer onto the opposing die, and coins subsequently struck by that damaged die may show unexpected design elements in unusual locations. A genuine clash can be an intriguing piece of evidence about the mechanical history of the minting process. Similarly, a struck-through error can occur when foreign material becomes trapped between the die and planchet during striking. Depending on the material and the circumstances, the resulting coin may show missing details, unusual depressions, distorted surfaces, or other distinctive characteristics. These errors can vary greatly in appearance, and some may be subtle while others are immediately obvious. Another possibility that can create enormous collector interest is a wrong planchet strike. This happens when a coin is struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or another type of coin. Because different coins can have different sizes, weights, thicknesses, and compositions, a wrong planchet quarter may display characteristics that do not match a normal quarter. A potentially genuine wrong planchet error should always be authenticated carefully because unusual weight or appearance can also result from damage or later alteration. A professional examination can help determine whether the coin's characteristics are consistent with a genuine minting mistake. Multiple strikes are another possibility. A coin may occasionally receive more than one strike, and if the second strike occurs in a different position, the design can become visibly duplicated or shifted. Dramatic multiple strike errors can be fascinating because they show the coin's production history directly on its surface. Depending on how much the second strike moved and how clearly the separate impressions can be identified, collectors may consider such an error more or less desirable. Weak strikes can also attract attention, but this category requires caution. A weakly struck coin can result from insufficient striking pressure, die condition, mechanical issues, or other production circumstances, but weak details can also result from ordinary wear. A circulated coin that has lost detail through decades of use should not automatically be described as a mint error. Collectors therefore need to consider the entire coin, including its surfaces, edges, rims, design details, and wear patterns. The condition of a 1982 P quarter can also have a major impact on its desirability. Even when a coin has an interesting error, heavy circulation, scratches, corrosion, cleaning, or other damage can affect how collectors view it. A genuine mint error preserved in exceptionally high condition can be particularly attractive because it combines the rarity of the error with the rarity of excellent preservation. Original surfaces are generally important to collectors, so you should never polish or aggressively clean a coin simply because you think a shiny appearance will increase its value. Cleaning can leave hairlines, remove original surfaces, and potentially reduce collector interest. If you believe you have an unusual quarter, the safest approach is usually to preserve it as found and seek knowledgeable advice. Another important factor is provenance. If an unusual coin has a documented history, especially through reputable collections, grading services, or auction records, that information can help establish confidence in its authenticity and market history. But again, claims on social media or video titles are not the same thing as documented auction results. A headline saying that a coin is worth $115 million does not prove that a coin has actually sold for that amount. The responsible collector should look for reliable evidence before accepting an extraordinary valuation. If you discover a 1982 P quarter with a dramatic error, begin by carefully examining it without altering the coin. Check the date, inspect the lettering, look closely at the rim, examine the edge, study the strike, and compare the coin with reliable numismatic references. If you have accurate equipment, you may also record the coin's weight and dimensions, because significant differences from standard specifications can sometimes provide useful clues. However, measurements alone cannot establish a valuable error, and professional authentication remains important when a coin last 1977 $quarter coin. Today we are diving into the fascinating world of the 1977 $quarter, a coin that may look completely ordinary at first glance but can become extremely interesting when genuine mint errors, unusual varieties, or exceptional condition are involved. If you have ever looked through an old jar of coins and wondered whether one of those familiar quarters could be worth far more than its face value, this is exactly the kind of story that makes coin collecting so exciting. The 1977 Washington quarter was produced for everyday circulation, and many examples were made, meaning that the date alone does not make every 1977 quarter rare. However, the world of error coins is different, because a coin can become desirable when something unusual happened during its manufacture and that mistake survived the minting process. You may have heard sensational claims that a 1977 $quarter could be worth $110 million because of errors and mistakes, but an extraordinary number like that should be understood as a headline-style possibility rather than the established value of a normal 1977 quarter. Real market value depends on authentication, rarity, condition, demand, provenance, and documented sales, and a genuine coin would need extraordinary evidence before a valuation anywhere near such a figure could be considered credible. Even so, that does not mean your 1977 quarter is not worth examining, because genuine mint errors can be fascinating and sometimes highly collectible. One of the first possibilities collectors may investigate is a double die variety. A true double die occurs during the preparation of the die itself, before the coin is struck, and can result in noticeable separation or doubling in parts of the design. Collectors may carefully examine the date, lettering, inscriptions, and other design elements for characteristics consistent with genuine die doubling. However, this is an area where beginners often make mistakes because not every coin with apparent doubling is a valuable doubled die. Machine doubling, die deterioration, normal strike effects, scratches, and post-mint damage can all create appearances that may look unusual under magnification. A genuine doubled die characteristic must be studied carefully and compared with known examples before anyone should claim that the coin is a major rarity. Another exciting possibility is an off-center strike. During normal production, a blank planchet must be positioned correctly between the dies before the enormous pressure of the strike transfers the design onto the metal. If the planchet shifts out of position, the resulting quarter can have the design dramatically displaced toward one side, leaving part of the planchet blank. A minor displacement may not be especially significant, but a dramatic off-center strike can attract collector interest, especially if important identifying details such as the date remain visible. The more obvious the error and the more convincingly it can be attributed to the minting process, the more interesting it becomes. Another possible error is a broad strike, which occurs when the coin is struck without being properly contained by the collar. Instead of maintaining the normal dimensions and rim structure, the metal can spread outward under striking pressure. The result can be a coin that appears unusually wide or has an abnormal rim configuration. A genuine broad strike can be a fascinating production error, but collectors must distinguish it from a quarter that was flattened or altered after leaving the mint. The edge and rim can provide valuable clues, which is why serious collectors inspect the entire coin rather than focusing only on one unusual mark. Clipped planchets are another possibility that can make a 1977 quarter worth investigating. Before a quarter receives its design, the blank planchet is punched from a sheet of metal. If something goes wrong during that process, part of the planchet can be missing, creating a distinctive clip. Depending on how the problem occurred, the missing section may have a curved shape or another recognizable form. A genuine clipped planchet can be especially interesting when the metal flow and rim characteristics are consistent with a mint-made error. However, a coin can also be cut, damaged, or altered after production, so the appearance alone is not enough to prove authenticity. This is why proper examination matters. Collectors may also search for die cracks, die chips, and die breaks. Coin dies are exposed to tremendous pressure during production, and over time they can develop cracks or breaks. When a damaged die continues striking coins, the defect can appear on the coins as raised lines, bumps, or unusual shapes. A small die crack may be subtle, while a major die break can produce a dramatic raised area that makes the coin immediately recognizable. If the same unusual characteristic appears on multiple examples, collectors may be able to identify it as a specific die state or variety. This can make the coin more interesting because it connects the individual piece to a particular moment in the life of the die. Another possibility is a die clash. A clash can happen when opposing dies come together without a planchet between them, allowing portions of one die's design to transfer onto the other. Coins struck afterward may show unexpected shapes or design elements in places where they do not normally belong. Genuine clash errors can provide a fascinating glimpse into the mechanical problems that occurred during production. Similarly, struck-through errors can occur when foreign material becomes trapped between a die and the planchet during striking. The material can interfere with the transfer of the design, leaving missing details, depressions, distorted areas, or unusual textures. Some struck-through errors are subtle, while others are dramatic enough to be immediately noticeable. The exact appearance depends on what material was involved and how the striking event occurred. Another potentially important possibility is a wrong planchet error. This occurs when a coin is struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or type of coin. Because different planchets can have different dimensions, weights, thicknesses, and compositions, a wrong planchet quarter may have characteristics that immediately appear inconsistent with a normal quarter. A genuine wrong planchet strike can be highly interesting because it represents a major production mistake. However, authentication is absolutely essential because an unusual weight or appearance can also result from post-mint alteration, corrosion, damage, or intentional modification. Collectors should never assume that an unusual coin is automatically a wrong planchet error without evidence. multiple strikes are another possibility worth understanding. If a quarter receives more than one strike and the second strike occurs in a different position, the design can become visibly duplicated, shifted, or distorted. Dramatic multiple strike errors can be especially fascinating because the finished coin can preserve evidence of multiple stages of the striking process. The exact value of such a coin depends on the characteristics of the error, the condition, its rarity, and collector demand. Weak strikes can also create unusual-looking quarters, but they require careful interpretation. A weakly struck coin may have incomplete or faint details because of striking pressure, die condition, or other production factors. However, worn coins can also lose details through years of circulation, so a weak appearance alone is not enough to establish a mint error. This is why collectors should compare questionable coins with normal examples and consider the entire pattern of wear. Another important factor is the condition of the coin. A genuine mint error preserved in excellent condition can be much more desirable than a similar error that has been heavily circulated, scratched, corroded, cleaned, or otherwise damaged. Collectors often value original surfaces and strong details, and an unusual error with exceptional preservation can be particularly appealing. If you find a potentially valuable 1977 quarter, do not clean it. Polishing, rubbing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently alter the surface and potentially reduce collector interest. The safest approach is to preserve the coin in its existing state and seek qualified advice if the characteristics appear unusual. The question of value is also much more complicated than simply looking at a headline. You may see claims online that a certain quarter is worth tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, but an internet claim is not the same as a verified transaction. Actual market value comes from what collectors are willing to pay for an authenticated coin, and credible auction records, professional grading information, and documented provenance are much stronger evidence than an unsupported valuation. A normal 1977 quarter should not be assumed to be worth $110 million simply because a video or social media post uses that number. If an extraordinary coin genuinely existed, it would require extraordinary proof. This distinction is important because responsible coin collecting is based on evidence rather than hype. At the same time, the search itself remains exciting. Imagine opening an old box and discovering a 1977 quarter that looks slightly different from every other coin in the collection. Maybe the date appears doubled, the design is dramatically shifted, the rim has an unusual shape, or a large portion of the planchet appears to be missing. Instead of spending it, you begin researching